candidate of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, in Lagos State, Olufunso Doherty, has vowed to disentangle Alpha Beta Consulting, a tax company in the state. The former managing director and chief executive officer of Pensions Alliance Limited says he will reform public service if elected as the governor of Lagos State, and that his administration will address the chaotic traffic situation in the state and reduce regulation and tax burden on small businesses and low-income earners. Also invest in building quality education and health sectors. Joining us now on the show to talk about his governorship vision for Lagos State is Olufunso Doherty, governorship candidate of the Action Democratic Congress, ADC. Good morning, Mr. Doherty.
Good morning.
And welcome
African
to the morning
Democratic
show.
Congress.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You were most recently on the platform of the platform.
Yes,
on Sunday,
yes.
where you raised some of these issues. Now, one of the things you talked about is the lack of transparent leadership in the bane of the Nigerian development process. So are you saying there's lack of transparent leadership in Lagos State? I will need you to link some of those issues to the specific case of Lagos State. And secondly, what you intend to do about traffic situation in Lagos. Because the incumbent administration says as part of, the Tinubu legacy, they have a transportation master plan working on waterways. They've done a light rail project. They are talking about the fourth mainland bridge and all that. Do you have issues with, that master plan? You say that master plan is not good enough. If you win, you just shove it aside.
Okay, thank you, and good morning again. And by the way, congratulations on the 10th anniversary of Arise. You guys have done a great job. So I think that clearly what we are saying is that transparency in Lagos can be a lot better. We think that the activities of the state, the activities of government, the projects that government undertakes, the engagement of government with the private sector in areas like public-private partnerships, etc., can be much more transparently administered, and we can have a lot more in the public domain than we currently do. And if you take, for example, one of the things we talked about, the Blue Line Rail project, for example, this is a project that started with a time frame of 4 years. We are 14 years down the road. It is not clear why it has taken so long, what the costs of that engagement are, and why we have had that both time and cost overrun. And we think that these are things that ought to be in the public domain. And I have said that when we come, one of the things that we will do is we'll open up that project and put the information in the public domain. Even if you take things like I think it's a culture, actually, if you ask me. If you take things like the tax administration of the state. So if you take the Alpha Beta arrangement that we have, for example, this is a private company, closely held, not clear what the ownership of the company is, collecting a share of the tax revenues of the state for an extended period of time. These are things that ought to be, first of all, it ought not to be. And if we have such an engagement with a private entity, it should be very clear who the state is dealing with and who is benefiting from those activities on behalf of the people of Lagos State. So that's one. And the second half of your question had to do with, remind me. Transportation. So, look, the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, we measure things by their outcomes, right? So it is not enough to say that you have expended so much, or that you have spent so much, or that you say that you have commissioned a light rail project 14 years after, and it's not operational, you're just commissioning it. When we look at the outcome, the reality, the fact of the matter is that people are still spending 4-5 hours in traffic in Lagos on a daily basis. And we must measure by outcomes, not by input or effort. That's the yardstick by which you measure government. And I think that we can pay lip service to what we are doing on the waterways, what we are doing on rail, what we are doing on the roads. But at the end of the day, the experience of the people is the experience of the people. Yeah. And it leaves a lot to be desired.
All right.
But the fourth mainland bridge, they've gone far with it. By March, they're going to award the contract. They already have a preferred bidder. They already have 3 companies lined up. So if you win, you will cancel the Fourth Mainland Bridge?
No, I've not said we'll cancel it. I've said we will halt it and we'll undertake a review of the project from 2 perspectives. One is to even understand whether, in the light of the transit issues that we're dealing with in Lagos State, that is the best use of $2.5 billion, right? For a project which is supposed to take 4 years. The previous one, which was supposed to take 4 years, took 14. And up till today, we don't know how much it costs. So we said we will stop it first, review it, determine whether it is at the appropriate use of those resources and the appropriate solution to provide at this time, and then we'll take a decision. Again, I think that this is a project that is a huge public works project. It's being undertaken under a PPP arrangement. It's not enough to come out and say, we had bidders and we've reduced it to 3 bidders and we've chosen a preferred bidder. That whole process should be in the public domain. We should know the entire process. And ultimately, even the terms of the PPP should be in the public domain, because it's on behalf of the people of Lagos. And $2.5 billion is an incredible amount of money. Even for a state like Lagos, it's almost 2 trillion naira. Our annual budget for a whole year is about 1.7 trillion, inclusive of 500 billion that we borrow, by the way. So it is not trivial. And you are committing people to a large expenditure for an extended period of time on one public works project. So it should be out there.
All right. So talking about transport, another big menace which you addressed at the platform that's plaguing the city of Lagos is touts, popularly referred to as Agbero.
Yes.
In fact, in your statement, you said that they've become a part of the political structure in Lagos State.
Yes.
And therefore, there's no political will to do away with them. And so over the years, despite promises or asking for a deal, to tackle this situation, the governors haven't been able to do it.
Yes.
What would be your solution to reading, perhaps, or putting them to better use, to make them more productive for these young people who are on our roads as touts, popularly called as Agberos?
Okay, so I think the first thing to realize is that to make a dent in the problem, you have to have, again, the political will. So the first thing, and the freedom to make that decision. But if they're a large part of the electorate that puts you in power, then you're going to be hamstrung in that effort. And if we come to power, we'll come to power on the support of the people, and so we'll not have that constraint. And so we can act. Now, beyond that, if you look at the dynamics of the Agbero structure, basically what you have is like a pyramidal organization, right? And essentially you have a lot of foot soldiers, right? And then you have a flow of resources, right, to a few people within that, at the top of that pyramid. Some of those resources, it's not clear where all of those resources are going. Some may be government levies. Many may be levies that are ending up in private pockets. And we are saying that you need to come in there first. First of all, put some order around what they are doing. So for example, this chasing of people on the highways, you can stop that first and say that those levies should not be collected on the highways, right? Then secondly, what you want to do is to ensure that those foot soldiers have an alternative means of livelihood, right? And you can even put in place a short-term solution that replaces that revenue, that income, right? You will be surprised that most of those foot soldiers, when you look at the amount of money that is flowing through the system, the amount that is being shared among those foot soldiers is probably a very small part of the money. And most of the money is the money that ends up. And that's how this pyramidal organization works. It's the same way criminal organizations work. It's the same way when you have this pyramidal structure. Most of the money flows into a few pockets. And the foot soldiers, who are the vast majority of the people, really have peanuts. So it actually does not cost a whole lot to replace those incomes at the bottom of the pyramid and take care of a lot of people. And then over time, you can then integrate them into other forms. And we've talked about things like our educational system, our plans for that system, vocational education, technical education, sports. These are all things where you can bring in people who have fallen out of the mainstream. And you can even do it in an adult education context. And again, this is consistent also with our plan for the commercial part of Lagos, right? Because if you think about Lagos, and I made this point, Lagos is a city that's a port city. It's on the coast. We have a large population by the coast. So it's a natural draw for anybody who is looking to establish a business to serve that that market and also to be a base for export. But to do that in scale, you basically need a skilled workforce, right? Because that's what those people look for. They look for the geographic advantages that we have, working infrastructure, and a skilled workforce, right? So we think that this, again, this whole Agbero situation also ties into that broader, integrated plan that we have for Lagos, such that Lagos then becomes an attractive destination because it has all of these components, right? Together with a supportive government, which we will be, to enable business and drive prosperity.
You talked about alpha beta. How are you going to tackle it? Knowing fully well that it's been codified in law, it's gone through the National Assembly. What will be your plan to be able to get it out of the way, like you said you'll do? Secondly, I want you to talk about flooding, which is a very big problem that is happening. Also, do you think Lagos needs a social safety net? Because there's a massive level of unemployment now, occasioned by many economic factors in the state. So it is riddled with 2 million out-of-school children, but also a lot of very poor people, despite the fact that it is looked at as a center of affluence.
So alpha beta. Yes, there's probably a contract, right? And we'll look at all the details of the contract. There's no contract that is a forever and ever contract, right? So there must be conditions under which contracts can be terminated. Even if those provisions are not in the contract, we need to understand the basis for the contract, who the beneficiaries of the contract, etc. are. And even if there's a contract and those underlying bases are inconsistent with the public trust under which those serving public officers were when they signed those contracts, we can actually take action that says that the basis of this contract is flawed and therefore we think it should be vitiated. So we'll go into that, and ultimately we believe that we will take whatever legal processes we need to. In other words, we will not act outside of the law.
How would you deal with the State House of Assembly?
This is a contract that the executive has signed. Okay. It's a contract that the executive has signed, and we're looking at it, and looking at this contract, and looking at the people of Lagos, and saying, is this contract in public interest? And if there are actions that the Attorney General's office needs to take, the Department of Public Prosecutions will take those actions. So the main thing is the will, and to divorcing the interests of the beneficiaries of that contract from the interests of government and the people of Lagos. And we will do that once we come in.
Okay.
The second question had to do with flooding. And this is a perennial problem. I think that it is something that we as the managers of Lagos must have front and center in our minds. When we define infrastructure, and I've spoken about our Tiger Agenda, which you all may be familiar with. The I in our Tiger Agenda is infrastructure to support a modern mega city. When we define infrastructure, one of the things that we define as infrastructure is the environmental infrastructure, which has to do with water control, flooding, wetlands, etc., channelization, and so on. So you need to ensure that as a state, you have a roadmap and a long-range plan around this. And by the way, there's global warming. So that problem is not going to get less, it's going to get more. So we need to be planning proactively ahead and building the infrastructure to ensure that whatever flooding will be occasioned by that is adequately planned for, and we invest resources to make that happen. So it will not be very different, actually, from the approach that we take to infrastructure in all the other areas. We'll just ensure. Do you have a specific
plan for flooding? How are you going to evacuate these waters? What are you going to do? That is a relief mechanism and things like that?
No, that's a technical, what you've just asked is a technical question. What I'm saying is that the way you get to a solution that works, and I'm not an engineer, the way you get to a technical solution that works is to understand the problem, define it at the appropriate level. In other words, this is an infrastructure problem, and you must build the infrastructure to support it so that you are not in a reactive mode each time there's a flooding season, because flooding is going to come.
Does it need a safety net? The state need a safety net with all of this economic?
So to me, I think that ultimately, a state like Lagos should have a supportive mechanism for its most vulnerable citizens. I believe so. If you look at the T in our Tiger Agenda, it says tax reform for equity, prosperity, and growth. And what are we saying there? One of the things we're saying is that, look, your tax system, which is your whole system of fiscal interaction with your people around finances and what you take from them and what you give to them, must be such that the people who earn the most are paying the most, the people who earn the least are paying the least, and the people who need help, right, and the reduced burden of taxes and perhaps social support. When you get the economy to a sufficient degree of prosperity, you can do more with respect to those redistributive mechanisms. So I would be supportive of that. I would be supportive of reducing the tax burden as the first instance on the most vulnerable, lowest cadre. And by the way, what we have in Lagos is almost a regressive tax system. When you think about both the formal and the informal taxes and levies that people pay. So we think about the normal taxes that people pay in the LIRS and so on. But everybody, whether they're street traders, whether they're commercial bus drivers and so on, they pay levies on a daily basis. If you total these levies, you might find that their effective tax rate is substantially higher than yours and mine, right? They may be paying a tax rate of 40, 50%. And okay, we say this does not need to happen. We can get rid of it.
We have limited time.
Sure.
Two things.
Yes, sir.
You are running for the position of governor in Lagos State, which someone mentioned in, I think, Calabar recently. Or no, or is it to you recently? That he is his backyard. The man who has been labeled the father of modern Lagos.
Yes.
The city boy,
yes,
of Lagos.
Yes.
Who at the same time is the presidential candidate of the ruling party of the country.
Yes.
And he has a sitting governor who has been told would do a second term by the grace of the Godfather.
Yes.
How strong is your level of optimism? That's one. Two, INEC has said, look, most voters, accredited voters in Lagos State, many of them have not collected their PVCs. So do you have any strategy to mobilize people to turn out on election day? Because that can make a difference.
Yes.
But if people don't have their PVCs, they won't come out.
Thank you. Great questions. So my level of optimism is very high. On what is it based? You outlined a set of factors. Incumbents, Calabar, Lion of Bodilon, and so on and so on. By the way, remember that our agenda is Tiger agenda. So this is Tiger versus Lion. So
the Tiger we are.
The Tiger agenda is over. We're on the way.
Are you from Isaleko or from
Campus Square?
Okay, the Tiger of Campus Square versus the Lion of Bodilon. That would be interesting to see.
But on the other side is the people of Lagos. The people of Lagos. And no matter how powerful a centralized group that has had control of the state for 25 years can be, they can never be more powerful than the people of Lagos if they express their will in a particular direction. And we are saying, in our engagement with the people of Lagos, and I've been across Lagos, and even tomorrow I will be in Shomolu, Bariga local government. Everywhere we go, people are of the view that their lives are the way they are because of the leadership that they have. They recognize it. And I'm talking not just of the elite, I'm talking about the people in the markets, I'm talking about the people in the mechanic villages. And so I'm very optimistic about 2023. As you can see, there's a greater level of awareness amongst all cadres. They talk about the youth, but I've found it amongst the older people, I found it amongst the lower socioeconomic category, etc. People are very clear that they want something different. They want a leadership that will act in their interest, and that's the message that we bring. And we expect that 2023 will be very different from prior years. One of the things that people have asked is that their votes likely to count in 2023 because they've had this concern in the past that, people tell us when we're walking through the market, they say, look, there's no problem about voting. We are going to vote. But you just make sure that our votes count. That's what they tell us.
Okay.
And in 2023, we believe they will. You asked a question about PVCs.
About voter turnout, yes. Yeah. Briefly.
Very briefly, I think that we are all making representations to INEC to improve their capacity to deal with this problem. I actually, unlike many people, think INEC is doing a reasonably good job. I'm quite supportive of that. I think they have an enormous challenge. But I think we just need to keep making the case And then on the demand side, ensuring that people do not relent in their efforts to ensure that they obtain those things. And we just have to support them in that process, and I think we will.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Doherty, gubernatorial candidate in Lagos State of the African Democratic Congress, ADC. We wish you all the best.